Now, for the next few minutes, after listening to the hit heparin-induced thrombocytopenia by Rajan, we will look into what are the complications of anticoagulants. Classification is we have parenteral, as discussed by the earlier speaker, and we have oral anticoagulants like Coumadin, Diravitus, and Inandion Diravitus. Coumadin, the commonest used are nicomarole, that is acetylene, and we have dicumarole and warfarin. Oral anticoagulants are structurally they are related to vitamin K, inhibits production of the anti-clotting factors, and they have a clearance is very slow. It's around 36 hours, and overdose usually can be reversed by vitamin K infusion. Crosses placenta, then there is a restriction and it's used during pregnancy, and we are all aware of the indications of these anticoagulants, be it DVT, be it pulmonary embolism, or be it in patients with heart diseases with valvular post-surgery valve replacements. Now, this is, we are all aware, intrinsic and extrinsic pathways. Let's not go in details into the clotting cascades. The warfarin mechanism, it usually acts on the factors 7, 9, 10, and 2. There was an article in 2008 in Chest with the guidelines, with evidence-based clinical practice guidelines dealing with hemorrhagic complications of anticoagulants and thrombolytic treatment. This is a landmark guideline which was enumerated in detail in the whole of the journal. The major adverse effects are with the anticoagulants is the hemorrhage. Usually the life-threatening hemorrhage is if it is a GI bleed or an intracranial bleed. Factors that influence the bleeding risk are, number one, is the concomitant clinical disorder when they are associated, like if the patient has a peptic ulcer, has a tumor or pre-existing liver disease, and the patient is having severe hypertension and, as told earlier, thrombocytopenia. The second is the intensity of anticoagulation. If it is excessive or poorly controlled, these are two common clinical problems we encounter in our practice. And the drug interaction, we're all aware. And the incidence of bleeding, there's an article in Chest in 2004 which says that it increases from 1% to 7% within 3 years. The risk increases with the duration of anticoagulation. Now, hence, the importance of the quality of the management of these patients who are on anticoagulants. We have anticoagulant management clinic where they are kept in the regular follow-up, advising them on the dose and the do's and the don'ts, as well as the use of point of care and our testing that helps to know and out on the spot and adjusting the dose. The other is the risk is higher when PT is prolonged beyond therapeutic range, and the patients on anticoagulants for CVA have a higher incidence of hemorrhage than the others, and gender and age do have an effect. The female gender has more chances of a bleed and age beyond 65, and patients who are on chronic renal failure. The types of bleed, sometimes the patients will have very minor bleed, they're reported but does not require additional testing or referrals, but there are small bruises. The serious bleed is defined as black tarry stools, the GI bleed, or hematuria or a hematoma on the extremities. They require treatment, medical evaluation, or at least 2 units of blood transfusion, depending on how low the hemoglobin is. But the life-threatening bleedings are the intracranial hemorrhage, as I said earlier, retroperitoneal bleed, all of these going into hemorrhagic shock, leading to cardiac arrest. And sometimes they need surgical or angiographic intervention, and some of them have an irreversible sequelae. Now, there was one of the textbooks which mentioned what is the bleeding risk index. I mentioned these as points of age beyond 65, history of stroke, history of GI bleed, and one or more of the following, like recent infarct, hematocrit less than 30, serum creatinine, and diabetes mellitus. The cumulative incidence of the major bleed is being said, it is low with 3% intermediate 12%, and high the risk group, which was over 53%. So this was a bleeding risk index which was mentioned and which helps in the clinics to evaluate the chances of bleed. Excessive anticoagulation. The patients treated with warfarin frequently become excessively anticoagulated, even those who have been stable for many months on the same dose. The most important causes are usually they receive concomitant drugs where they have interaction, superimposed diseases that if they develop some liver disorder, malabsorption that may interfere with warfarin injection, and the metabolism. There was a study performed among 17,000 outpatients treated with oral anticoagulants by the Red Cross Anticoagulation Clinic. Noted that the incidence of INR going beyond 6 of the 22 per 10,000 treatment days, the factors they have found that there is a 7 increase in INR in these patients who hitherto were normal, where the patients had diarrhea, worsened heart failure, they developed fever because of other reasons, impaired liver function, and in those patients also who had a stable heart failure. So this goes to say that we have to be very careful in assessing the patients who are on anticoagulants for additional risk factors. The other lesser common reactions or adverse effects we see in these patients who are on anticoagulants are purpura and ecchymosis, which is seen in literature between 0.01 to 1% of fatal skin infarcts. Usually they are seen between 3rd to 6th day. They are very common in obese, middle-aged women and seen on buttocks and thigh most commonly. So here the avoidance of large loading dose and overlapping of heparin and anticoagulants for 3 to 4 days, reduces the risk of necrosis of the skin. And the skin lesions, when you see, sometimes lead to purple toe syndrome, what it is called as, may be due to the coagulation in the microvessels. Patients with congenital protein C deficiency, are prone to develop skin necrosis. This was published in Journal of Internal Medicine 2003. Here they mentioned the combination of oral anticoagulants with heparin for 10 to 12 days at a lower dose reported to be successful in reducing the incidence of skin necrosis. So you can see this adverse effects like skin necrosis, purple toe syndrome, allergic dermatitis, as well as vasculitis. The onset of symptoms is usually between 3 to 8 weeks, and this particular rare syndrome called purple toe. And when you look into the laboratory values, the PT, hemoglobin, and platelets, they're all within the normal limits, and there is no significant evidence of hemorrhage in this group of patients who develop complications with the oral anticoagulants. The minor other complications are, like we have congenital disorders, we have chest pain, nausea, vomiting, like any other drugs. Now, there is some subset of patients who have genetic interaction. The number of gene variants have been associated with altered sensitivity to treatment of warfarin. And here it says the hepatic chromosome, that is cytochrome 450 isoform, which inactivates warfarin, and leading to increased incidence of bleeding disorders in these group of patients. The other complication is alopecia. The incidence is between 5 to 78%, and alopecia may recur upon re-challenging with the warfarin, and it gets better once we stop this. The drug interaction, the most commonest is with the antibiotics. The risk of over anticoagulation is increased by amoxicillin, clarithromycin, norfloxacin, and sulfamethoxazole. Often within the first 3 days of antibiotic usage, it is not clear whether these results will also apply to the patients taking warfarin, but this is very common on patients with acetone. Now, in literature, we have seen whether can we use this concomitantly with NSAIDs and aspirin use, and it has been said in the literature, and we have also seen that patients are on anticoagulants along with NSAIDs have an increased risk of bleed, especially the GI bleed. And the use of therapeutic doses of warfarin along with low dose heparin, still many of the cardiologists use this, are of some value in patients with mechanical heart valves. There are some patients who have vitamin K deficiency. Patients are at risk of excessive degree of anticoagulation following institution of treatment with warfarin. So these patients on vitamin K deficiency are those who receive chemotherapy, who are anorexic, and there's patients who are on TPN who receive no vitamin K supplementation, and patients who receive for long term, more than 10 to 14 days of beta-lactamases, especially the cefoperazone and group, develop vitamin K deficiency, and it is being mentioned in the literature that we need to replace vitamin K in such patients, and when these group of patients are on anticoagulant, there is increased risk of bleeding. Now, how do we manage these patients? There are certain guidelines where there are high INR value with minor or no bleeding. Especially if there is a major bleed, we need to treat this with FFPs and prothrombin complex concentrate, vitamin K usually given as both intravenously but for 3 to 5 days, and we need to repeat if necessary. So this was a study by Heikel and Singer who says the risk of intracranial hemorrhage was seen as outpatient group of patients where it is increased with duration of time. A word about management of warfarin during the invasive procedures. Whenever patients on anticoagulants, when they are subjected to invasive procedures, we need to hold warfarin for 2 to 3 days, switch them on to low molecular heparin, and restart them from 12 to 24 hours post-procedure. What is most important in patients whom we keep on oral anticoagulants is effective education. Teach them the basic concepts of safe and effective anticoagulation. Tell them the complication which they can encounter. Discuss the importance of regular INR monitoring, which many patients have very, very low compliance with this, and counsel them on the use of other medications, especially alcohol, and develop a creative strategies for improving the compliance in this group of patients. And when we talk about heparins, it was dealt the complications by Rajan earlier. Now we will not go into the details of HIT and type of HITs and how do we manage them. And these are the two molecules which are used in the management of HIT. And the other novel anticoagulants which are in vogue now is pantoparinox and idraparinox. Pantoparinox is available in the market, and idraparinox is under trial. I think the clinical trial of this, our institute was also part of this. It recently got concluded 6 months back, and results are still awaited. It might take an year or so till we get this. Pantoparinox is still used for DVT prophylaxis. There are a lot of reports of its advantage with lesser complications and lesser bleeding risk. So it is still used as an alternative agent for low molecular heparin treatment of HIT. So direct thrombin inhibitors, zimilgatran was studied extensively, and there were 2 to 3 studies, THRIVE study, and we have stroke prevention study called SPORTIF study, and the adverse event of this particular molecule was hemorrhage and liver toxicity. So in conclusion, that the impressive results of this anticoagulant was that it had very good results, but the complication rate was so high in the form of liver toxicity and bleeding, and the incidence of coronary artery disease. This was pulled out from the market entirely in February 2006. The other molecule which is in vogue now, which is reports are still coming on this, and the final trial report is going to come within 1 year, is that of idronaparinox, which has got an advantage that it can be used in once in a week dose. So its advantage is that there is no need for the patient to take a daily dose, and the disadvantage is it is a very long acting. There are no specific antidote for this particular molecule. So this is the this is not an article, but this is an abstract presented in the American Society of Hematology conference in 2006. So these are a few of the complications which we routinely encounter while using anticoagulants in the patients, and one has to be very careful in counseling the patients that what dosage they are taking and what would be the complications, at what time they should get the INR done and report to the physician back. Thank you.